Talk Live with search engine optimization and marketing expert Robert O'Haver, powered by the Robert Palmer family of companies.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of Search Talk Live. I'm your host, Robert O'Haver, along with today, Michelle Stinson Ross of Gruen Agency. How's it going, Michelle?
It is going great. The sun's shining, the lawn has been mowed, and it's a good day today.
Those of you tuning in for the first time, we are a digital marketing podcast. We talk about everything to come you can imagine with digital marketing. It could be paid advertising, social, content marketing, SEO. We both have extensive backgrounds in all of that stuff. We're a master of none, though. No, I'm just kidding. But you can go today during the show, go to Twitter, type in hashtag Search Talk Live, and you can ask your questions, make comments during the show, and we will answer them live on the show if you have questions. Either us or our guest will. We also, go to visit searchtalklive.com. You can go there to get what shows are coming up and sign up for our newsletter. So you can get that information through the email. Can't talk today. So also, and go to Spreaker. Go there. You can listen to the show live, or you can get previous episodes and listen to those. You can also comment on the show during the show and leave your questions as well there. And let's see, what else am I missing here? Well, I don't want to waste any time. The show is an hour long, so we got to cover a lot. So today our guest is a paid search expert. Her name is Maddie Cary, and she is with Poinit. Maddie, how's it going?
Hi, good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. We've got a lot to cover. So we're going to be talking paid search today, kind of a switching gears. We talk a lot of SEO. We talk a lot of content marketing and all kinds of stuff. So it's kind of nice to have a change here. Let's see. Now, we're going to talk about the role of paid search and profitability. Can you, before we get into that, I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am our director of paid search here at Poinit Digital Marketing out in Seattle, Washington. Beautiful, often rainy Seattle, Washington. And I oversee our paid search service line for any of our clients. So that involves running our account management team and developing solution design for paid search prospects, and ultimately helping clients understand the role that paid search plays in their holistic multi-channel strategy. So my background, I've one of those people that kind of stumbled into paid search. I've been doing it for about 6 years now, and currently am glad and lucky to do quite a bit of speaking and training and teaching around paid search at different conferences and events. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
All right. So where would you like to start?
Well, I think that it would be kind of fun to talk a little bit about what kind of role people expect paid search to play in profitability and kind of, how it factors in with other channels, and maybe even looking at different advertisers, how they understand profitability is measured with paid search. Because, I acknowledge that paid search kind of has an upper hand as a tactic. It sits more at the bottom of the funnel, right? It's oftentimes one of the channels that often sees that kind of last click activity, and therefore, gets a lot of credit for, things that other channels help drive and lead down the funnel. So that's always been an interesting kind of view for me, is dealing with clients who, how they have expectations around paid search's role and that profitability, and ultimately, how do we measure from that click and that demand, that qualified demand driving to site, and how that plays and ties back to the client's ROI in the back end of things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one thing I have to say is I run into clients all the time that they're just totally intimidated by the whole thing. And I totally understand, because, I mean, you go into an AdWords account for the first time and you're like, what the, But,
yeah, there's a lot of features. There's a lot of options. I always say that search, one of the great things about it is that because it's more of a text-driven format, there's a lot of just options for people in terms of what they can do with an ad, how they can write an ad, first of all, what kind of keywords they can target. There's basically what feels like an infinite amount of options that you can choose from.
Right.
And because of that, I think when advertisers approach it, if they haven't really done it before or have done it minimally, or maybe you've even just done it a long time ago, it kind of feels like walking up to a buffet that has like 100 options and trying to like figure out how to fill one plate with all of those. And not knowing where to begin with that investment and how to make sure it's being used effectively.
Right, because you see it time and time again where they learn the basics, they go in and throw a ton of keywords into an ad group and then just let it roll.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of little things that can be done in order to make sure you're using that budget effectively. I mean, I can't tell you how many audits I've done where it's like, wow, there's no negative keywords in this account, or there's no negative even site placements if they're running something on Google Display Network. And they're basically telling Google, like, I'm okay with whatever you match me to. And, there's these little things that you can do to more efficiently use your investment and ultimately, drive that improved profitability down the line.
Sure. And it takes, anybody can drive traffic to a site, but it's getting that quality traffic.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Maddie, how much does the persona and the psychology of the user play a role? I mean, yes, there are tons and tons and tons of options, but does starting that process with your ideal persona kind of narrow that and enable advertisers to focus a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is where, kind of saying before, search has an upper hand sometimes with other channels. This is actually where I think search struggles, or sometimes search marketers struggle. You look at channels like what can be done via display targeting and social, and there is an abundance of audience data that allows you to better understand or, lump your audience targeting based off certain personas, demographics, psychographics. There's a lot of options there. So it's easier for an advertiser to kind of define who their target market is, who they're trying to speak to, and then target them more directly in those channels. Now, of course, that is still going after folks who are not expressing an intent or interest in maybe your product or service yet. You're trying to get in front of them based on, you're trying to say to them, hey, based on what I know about you, our company or our product or service, we're the right fit for you. In search, it's a little bit the opposite. You're waiting for the searcher to come to you, and they're telling you explicitly with their query what they're looking for, which is a fantastic advantage. But up until the last couple of years, you don't have any information about what audience they fall into. The example I use always to illustrate this is a keyword like engagement rings, right? Like if someone is searching for an engagement ring, just that query, engagement ring. Well, are they the bride? Are they researching because they're hoping to get proposed to? Is it the actual, in this case, maybe the soon-to-be fiance who is thinking about proposing and he's actually ready to purchase? That single query doesn't tell us enough about that audience. But now in search, Google in particular and Bing as well have rolled out a lot of additional functionality to leverage audience data, whether that's importing audience data you define via analytics, whether that's importing email lists and targeting in that way, as well as building kind of lookalike or similar audiences that you can also layer onto search. So now...
Uh-oh. I think we lost you again.
In that.
Oh, there you are. Can you repeat that last sentence? You cut out on us.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Search is when we layer on audience information onto search, so that keyword plus audience is really where search is becoming the most powerful.
Yeah, definitely. And narrowing that key, if we're doing, search advertising, you narrow that keyword down to the intent, and that takes a special person to know that.
Right. Yeah.
So
and understanding that intent plus, where the person is within that audience bucket and what their intent with that search query might be versus someone in another audience bucket. And then really, so I see a lot of search marketers take it that far. I'm doing the targeting. I'm targeting the right keywords. I've layered on the audience. Great. Like I've done my job. But really the next step is, well, how is your search strategy, adjusting or shifting, knowing that extra information, that data is valuable. What are you doing with it? Are you bidding differently because of that? Are you messaging accordingly based on that audience? Are you speaking to them in any sort of a different way? Otherwise, you have this, basically almost pre-qualified lead, someone who has come to you with their search intent. You know a bit about what audience they're in. You know a bit more about kind of what persona they might fall into, if they're valuable to you or not. And then you serve them the same ad as the person you know nothing about. You've missed a big opportunity to further persuade them in and get them to convert.
Right. I mean, especially when it comes to retargeting, trying to send them the same message that you sent them originally. It's just, if it's coming from a display campaign.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Michelle, you got something?
Yeah, I can keep going. That's not a problem. I have tons of questions. So since we're talking about how we are better able to understand audiences, we're able to match an audience to a query. So how is voice search beginning to change this? I mean, I'm already seeing a need in some of our campaigns to really dial in those much more semantic, much more longer phrases, because users aren't afraid to just blather on at the search engine now, since they don't have to type it. We're kind of free from those oddly specific 1, 2, 3 word queries where we just left out all of, the information that makes that a semantic phrase, at least when we're typing. When we're doing it verbally, it's intuitive. We don't even think about what it is we're asking. We just ask what it is we want without worrying about the verbiage. How is that changing the way we need to strategize around our paid search?
Yeah, I think for...
Oh, we're losing you again.
Oh, are we good here?
Nope, can't hear you.
Can you hear me? How about now? Any better?
Nope.
Oh, so sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on with our mics today.
All right. Drop it and see what happens. No, I'm just kidding.
Right? Maybe I'll just shake it up a bit.
Stand by. We're having technical difficulty.
Anything better now?
No. Tell you what, why don't we take a break real quick and come back.
Find the true value of your home when you log on. HomeValue.com.
Search Talk Live is sponsored by the Robert Palmer family of companies. Check out robertpalmercompanies.com for more information.
All right, we're back. You there?
Yeah, hi guys.
Yeah, we got you now.
Yay, great.
Now you're
awesome.
yelling. Sounds like you're yelling at us.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'll bring it back down then.
All right, so go where we left off. I'm sorry.
Voice search.
Voice search. What does it mean? What does it mean for us as search marketers? I think that it's going to shape that, when we talk about that equation of audience plus query or keyword intent, I think that's going to be the piece that it shapes the most is on the query side. So just knowing how people change or shift their search behavior when they have voice search as an option. As you even called out, Michelle, if people are more comfortable kind of rambling on or using longer queries or using more kind of natural language or semantic type of language within how they query things. And it will be search marketers' jobs to, it's basically a new keyword or a new search demand opportunity that you have to make sure you're targeting and you're capturing, but as well understanding where those queries are primarily happening, which of course is most focused on mobile devices. So knowing that, again, what audience is coming in on a mobile device, it's not necessarily some unique separate audience that's different from desktop. We know about how searchers and just in general mobile usage, people navigate across different devices and bounce back and forth. But knowing that what they expect to be able to do or see on your site or what information they're comfortable giving is going to be different on a mobile device versus desktop. So it's about your messaging experience, your landing experience, ultimately knowing something about that audience and shaping what you do differently to speak to that.
Sure. Can you turn your mic volume down just a little? You there?
We overcorrected a bit.
Yeah. It's super loud.
Is this any better now?
A little bit lower.
A little bit lower?
Yep. See what happens when you go live?
Okay.
Yep. Are you there? Still here. Now you're too low.
Okay.
I'd rather have the too loud than the too low.
Yeah. How's this? Is that better?
No.
Clearly, we have an issue with the cable.
How's this?
That's perfect.
Perfect.
Don't touch anything.
Okay. Won't move.
Yeah. So, what would be your advice? I mean, obviously, have a professional do it. But for someone that's just starting out and wanting to do a campaign, let's run through maybe the basics of what's important. I mean, like your negative keywords and your, being specific, themed groups and that type of thing.
Yeah, I would say, for anybody who's really, if they're starting out from scratch for the first time, start by framing your campaign strategy based on a bit about how your website is structured. So looking at how things are categorized and themed and grouped, and start that as a place to start to get a sense of how you should bucket campaigns and keywords. Other kind of 101 things, making sure, bidding on brand keywords, so anything that is your brand name versus non-branded keyword queries, that those are separated out into different campaigns. Brand versus non-brand perform very differently, and even how you're speaking to people who are coming in on those different queries. You want to have different strategies from a bidding, messaging, landing page perspective. So having those things broken out is going to be critical. And then from there, it's, start out with a baseline. Define what your messaging will be in brand and non-brand in your different campaign groups. Start there, collect some data, get a sense of how things are performing before just kind of willy-nilly making adjustments on the fly. The thing I find comes up the most in search is we have clients that, because it is something that can be more instantaneously changed, there's not necessarily a need, at least if you're running text ads, to deal with, banner creative or those kind of image assets. There's a need to, or an impulse to change things, shift things, turn things on, turn things off. And it's important that you get a sort of trend line before you start making any big adjustments. But in that process, there's definitely just general health account things you can be doing, adding negative keywords. So looking at queries that are coming in you don't want to be matching to and negating those out. There's getting a sense from a quality score perspective where your keywords are at. Are there terms that are, below quality scores at, in the 3, 2, 1 range? How much really, even with amazing ad copy and landing pages, are you going to be able to change that? Probably not much. Are those keywords you should be targeting? If you're not getting any volume at all, again, are these the right keywords for you? So some of those kind of initial things that I call kind of the collection phase are going to be really critical before you jump off and start launching a completely new structure or a completely new strategy.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Have you run into this where your quality score is a, let's say, 4 or 5? Well, let's say 5 or 6. I've never had anything that low. But it's converting at 20%, and it's very profitable.
Yes. It's like some weird anomaly that you're almost too scared to touch or mess with, because you're afraid that, like, if you do, like, you'll ruin this thing that shouldn't be working. But it's kind of that, like, don't break, or don't fix what isn't broken, right? Yeah. Even though you're looking at it and you're like, it is broken. This is not a good quality score. Yeah. My advice is like sometimes you got to let those things run, and you can definitely test some different, doing copy testing and landing page testing and things might help get it up a point or two and maybe save you some on CPC. But sometimes like something that Google deems your quality on is low, but yet your performance says otherwise.
Right.
Sometimes that's the case.
And those of you listening that don't know, quality score is based on the the relevance of the keyword, the ads that you're serving with that keyword, and the landing page that it's on. Are they all relevant? Do they all have basically the keyword and the ads, that type of thing? But sometimes that's low and performs really well. So, like you said, I don't want to touch it if it's not broke.
Exactly. And sometimes that's okay. I mean, I've worked with clients who, we've gotten an account from them. It's a mess structurally. They're targeting, let's say, a lot of broad match keywords that don't have any sort of negatives or kind of guardrails in place. We make some adjustments. We do some restructuring. And then we're just sitting scratching our heads being like, why are the, better targeted, better messaged, strategy we've rolled out from a keyword perspective, it's not working as well as this kind of blanket cast the net targeting with keywords they were doing before. And you kind of have to go like, well, maybe we broke something that like wasn't broken that we thought was broken. And we have to like totally like readjust and you have those moments in search where it's like, sometimes best practices, like don't throw them out the window, but like, they're not always set in stone. Sometimes performance surprises you.
Yeah, definitely. And let's talk a little bit. I mean, I don't want to get too into it, but I think my belief is every paid search campaign must have a retargeting campaign. There's rare situations where I probably wouldn't do that, but let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely think that is a given. I mean, again, if you know something, if you know a searcher has interacted with your site in some way, it's important to then be ready to remarket to them, whether that be via what you're doing in search or as well, to look at how you remarket and target them on the Google Display Network as well. I think that's if you know something about your audience, you should be doing something with it, because that's the whole point of the type of digital marketing we do. It's us moving away from a traditional ad format where we were blasting people with, ads because, we expect that men in this age range like watch this television show, and therefore we're going to just blast a bunch of these products in them that we think and hope that some of them will then come through and buy them in our stores, right? Yeah. It wasn't very, granularly targeted, or didn't like speak more in a customized format to our audience. And there's been a lot of, looking at eMarketer and a lot of other surveys, particularly in the B2C space, like that is what consumers expect. Like they are expecting marketing as it evolves over the years to continue to provide a more customized and personalized experience. So whether that's in search or social or, what you're doing in display, retargeting is going to be the first lever you can pull to do that, because you know something about your audience, and that's when you're serving them an ad. And if you're not thinking like that, then you miss that opportunity, right? Like, I mean, in terms of, asking a question of you guys, in terms of what you do, how do you guys approach, what you do in your remarketing efforts, or, even just in your audience efforts and how you use that data? Yeah.
I mean, it almost takes a special person to do this. I mean, because you really have to think at it and build it out into, when you're building that strategy for a campaign, what is your goal? What is, if a person doesn't purchase and let's say you're retargeting them, and, you want your message to be specific, say, especially if and you know this better than I do, the e-commerce sites, if they were looking at products and stuff, and Amazon's really good at doing this, and several other companies, but, retargeting them with that specific product they were looking at, bringing different offers and that type of thing in their face.
Yeah. And it also, I mean, you look at the numbers and the results of it too, like because it's an audience that's been exposed to your site and, ideally has also started to poke around and consider what they want to purchase or sign up for or whatever it may be. From a targeting perspective, you're oftentimes you're winning back what I call lost revenue or lost conversions. So again, from a profitability standpoint, you're spending a little bit more to gain back what you would have just completely lost any sort of, net income on. And it typically converts at, higher conversion rates and better cost per conversion. It's more efficient ways to use that kind of last bit of dollars to that last ditch effort to get the person to come back. So it's effective and it's profitable too. So again, when you see advertisers who are not doing it or who have kind of backburnered it, it's painful because there's a way that they could be doing something that's going to make them more money down the line. Yeah,
especially like on the low hanging fruit, the cart abandonment, stuff like that,
Oh yeah, just some like basic 101s that if you're in the e-commerce space, you should be doing. And as well, asking yourself, also being careful with how you do that. Like an example is, I know anecdotally, I know lots of people who will put stuff in a cart and then leave because they know that they will get either a banner ad or an email push, or maybe even when they come to search, they're going to get offered a discount, often same day. They know they're going to be remarketed to. Mm-hmm. They're basically like gaming the system because they know. So that's the other thing too. It's like, what is the harm of actually, waiting a couple of days before you make that offer, and, not in a way training consumers to figure out how to pay less to you. I mean, you're remarketing to them with an offer because you're hoping to gain back some of that revenue. But, if you are overly discounting via your remarketing strategy, then people are going to start acting accordingly. And then, you actually will hurt yourself. So you do have to do that balance of remarketing at the right time, but making sure you're not just kind of blasting remarketing in a way that people figure out how to game your own advertising to benefit them.
Yeah.
Well said.
Absolutely.
Actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that. So I worked with an e-com brand for several months over the course of last year, and their product was a commonly used product, but it was definitely a different twist on this commonly used product. And it took a bit of education for a user to go, oh, okay, I get this. I really want this. This is super cool now that I kind of understand what the deal is with this thing. And as much as our decision makers really wanted a clear step-by-step path to purchase, we kept telling them, you know what, when it comes to educating a consumer on a product like this, there are so many different winding paths to purchase. It is incumbent upon us to make sure that we're using both retargeting across the board, whether we're retargeting, somebody that maybe visited the site via email, but we cookied them for Facebook and they keep seeing us on Facebook until they finally decide to come back and read that thing and go, oh, that's great. And then they finally decide, okay, I think I want to buy that thing. So then they type our name into search and finally buy that thing. That's really the reality of the path to purchase with most products on the internet anymore. And you can't just expect that one grand campaign is really going to get the job done all on its own.
Right. And it's also important that those channels are thinking about how they're doing things together or, kind of in tandem with each other, particularly in, I would argue it's valuable to do across all tactics, but what we're seeing in search and social and how those two play off each other, just given from, you even just think from like a device experience, right? Like someone sees something on Facebook and then they may go click on it and open up the website, and then they might go search on something on their desktop, and then they might come back to mobile and search it again, or because they can't make it come up on Facebook. And so there's, like you said, that winding path, not just between tactics, but between devices that, in all honesty, we know makes our jobs as digital marketers way harder. But we've created these experiences that allow for people, for it to be less, I see ad, I go buy immediately. There's so many different ways to connect and get through that. And it's important. And I see this a lot, advertisers who also don't have a plan or a kind of agreed upon strategy for how they message themselves across those different channels. So those teams just aren't talking to each other and talking about, oh, you're running a promo. Are we running it too? Or is there a strategic reason why, yes, we should offer them this promo in this channel, but not here? And, is our brand messaging aligned? Search looks like classified ads, right? You have roughly 70 to 80 characters to get your point across. And hopefully some site links and some extra kind of extensions and bells and whistles to help you stand out. But, right. When a searcher looks at search ads, they don't sit and read them for 3 minutes before deciding what to click through, right? They likely read your headline, hopefully a call to action, a bolded keyword, maybe the domain, so they know what brand you are, and they click through. Whereas in social, we have video formats and more visual imagery. And while we don't want to write novels, we can write a little bit longer text, a sentence or two. There's things that can be done there that are different. So the two need to talk to each other and make sure the right things are being called out in the right place. Just knowing how people interact with them. But also, they can't be exactly the same, because then they wouldn't kind of address how people are interacting with that copy and creative based on the channel.
Right.
Certainly. So how does that affect attribution? Because that's kind of the one thing that makes every digital marketer want to pull their hair out. It's like, okay, who actually won that purchase at the end of the day? How much of the spend on paid search gets attributed to that purchase, and how much of the spend in paid social gets to be nuts? But what, in your experience, seems to be the path through attribution?
Yeah, it's honestly, I think it is the nut that if some tool can fully crack, whether that's across channel, across tactic, across devices, offline to online. I mean, there are some definitely, I would acknowledge, some more expensive tools that have helped bridge a lot of those gaps, and the advertisers who can leverage them to tag things and get a better sense of, what channels or even what devices people explored before they got to that ultimate end conversion. I mean, that's kind of where you have to start, right? It's being able to collect and measure the data effectively. And a lot of advertisers have challenge with that. They have, they have channels that don't talk to each other. They have complex CRM systems to track from lead to ultimately, revenue, that things start breaking and stop talking to each other. There's not, unfortunately, a one-size-fits-all for every advertiser, but I think you have to start somewhere. You need to decide just generally first how you collect the data. Once you have it, at least having a conversation about understanding how performance is going to look different across those if we're using a last click attribution model. Channels like display especially, and social, and even at times SEO, what you're doing organically, kind of get the short end of the stick if you're using last click. Again, that's where search gets to shine, because it's often search and at times as well organic or even looking at direct. They got to get to just sit there after they've been a lead or a consumer has been primed to then kind of make their last decision in that search click. So
do you have
channels?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, do you have a tool that gives that assist information, so to speak?
I mean, we at Pointed, at least, we leverage a couple of different ways of doing it for clients. We have some clients that maybe leverage an atlas. We have clients who use click tag tracking via a double click, and use that to at least collect that data across channels and then get a sense of who assisted who. And we have clients who maybe aren't doing as much multi-channel but are focusing more just primarily in the search and maybe social space. So they'll even just leverage Google Analytics to kind of look at conversion paths across channel and figure out, okay, what is the most common path, and at least help that give them directionally a sense of what they should be doing investment-wise, right? Mm-hmm. The example I always use, we have clients who want to turn off mobile. They look at CPAs. They think it looks horrible because, of course, it's 2 or 3 times or more that of desktop cost per acquisition. They want to turn it off. And then we dig into their analytics, or even there's attribution there's an attribution area within AdWords that you can go look into this, and you can show them, well, of your conversions that we've driven from a last click model, let's say over the last 60 days, I'm actually seeing that mobile is the first step that people take before converting on desktop for, whatever it might be. I've seen, 60% of the time, 70% of the time. So if you turn off mobile, you just miss that touch point that actually is what then later drove them to go and convert on desktop. So do you want to remove your investment there? Is that really the move we want to make? It could really hurt us in what we're doing on desktop. So that's kind of the conversations we have with clients, and whether that's device or collecting what data we can get of that from the tools they have available of what they can track across channels too.
Gotcha. Shelley, you got anything?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I could keep going. So obviously all of that leads to, okay, how does one person efficiently manage all of that? Obviously, we can't afford to have full-time people just sitting there staring at our search campaigns all day, every day. How does automation fit into this to make us more efficient and more profitable without losing track of the human aspect of all of this?
Yeah, I think that you have to look at the elements of your strategy that impact time. So what are the things that take you a lot of time to do that maybe don't need the either, maybe the word is sophistication or don't need that human element. So for example, if you've built in a logic into generally how what time of day you're launching certain ads or something. Does it need to be a person who's the one who's like manually pushing and pulling down? Or can you leverage things like AdWords automated rules and scheduled actions within AdWords so that, you're allowing, like you said, automation to carry some of that load for you? I think what we've done internally here with our account teams is, folks will sit down and kind of make a list of all the work that they do on the account and identify what are the things that either can be done more efficiently or we can automate. And we put in it's important to put in some QA checks and balances to make sure that nothing goes kind of completely off the rails, right? For example, we, might automate an automated report that gets sent to our account lead every day, and it's checking for a campaign that's cost has gone up X amount or decreased X amount, so we can catch maybe an automated budget adjustment we're making and if something goes wrong. So there's some of that, and then there is identifying the things that I think will always need a human element, and those are things around audience targeting, messaging will always. You can automate things to come up and down, but at the end of the day, like I would never suggest somebody try to automate how they write copy or plug it into a tool that writes it for you. There's some things like that will need a person. And that the one that's probably the hardest is looking at query management. So looking at what you're actually targeting and then figuring out what should be added as a negative. There are some really great AdWords scripts that allow you to better figure out and automate adding negatives. I would highly advise that there's always a human element in that because you need it to again, that piece about intent. There needs to be a human involved to understand the intent and interpret the intent of a query rather than leaving it fully up to automation.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Because, there's no way to automate something like that that's going to give you that the intent of, all those different queries.
Mm-hmm. Well, we circle back around to the human element again. So in the 20 years that we've had paid search, pay-per-click, advertising available to us online, how much has language changed? There are new terms and phrases added to both the standard dictionaries as well as the urban dictionaries as younger groups of people come up and become more capable of making purchase decisions for themselves. Their use of language is different than the previous generation. There's so much that is dynamic and always changing, and doggone it, if that keyword strategy that worked so well 6 months ago all of a sudden is just What? It's probably because your users have changed the way they use language. There's something that changed in the industry that changed the way we use language.
Yeah. And how do you stay ahead of it? How do you get a sense of where demand is shifting across queries and how do you message to it accordingly? And, is it longer tailed? Is it shorter tail? Is it people nowadays have a much stronger kind of sense of affiliation and loyalty to brands. And, we look at even just, a little off topic, but we look at things like how when a brand does something wrong, for example, United, and how people react to that and how that kind of seeps into the space of marketing. Someone takes something, they share it onto social, people interact with it. It might then impact search demand for that brand, depending on how people are interacting with things and communicating about things. So I think from a brand marketing perspective, that's where I see the biggest impact over time, is that engagement and how people search, or especially how people interact with brands. Searchers have very different expectations now, right? Like they definitely are still searching, but they also are very comfortable with interacting with a brand's ad via Instagram, or interacting with a brand by looking at their video content and then coming to purchase. There's so many different ways that people are being approached by brands that they've kind of opened up, how they expect to be talked to. And search is kind of an interesting constant, not to get myself out of a job, but I do wonder how much that space will continue to change. If, do I think it'll become obsolete? I don't think so. I think we've somewhat ingrained it into the behavior of online consumers as a whole. But will people move away from going directly to a desktop search engine and more leverage it via their phone on voice search, or via a home assistant, or get comfortable searching for brands more so on YouTube? I think it's going to change a lot, and it's important that advertisers are aware that whatever you think is going to be the same now, 5-10 years now, it's going to be different. And if your brand doesn't adapt and follow it, then you're going to be left behind. Not to sound ominous, but but you may.
No, I absolutely agree with you. What were you going to say? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say yes too, because we've talked so much for the last 2-3 years about mobile getting and the emergence of the mobile first experience, and Google's doing all this stuff right now with mobile first indexing, and already we had better have our rock star role going on when it comes to mobile and start looking at voice search right now. What do we do when the content that we're serving, the ad that we're serving, is not at all visual, that it's served up on a device like Google Home, and it's completely verbal. We are finally entering, we're finally entering the era where we may be, for the first time, not paying for a click. We might actually be paying for some action other than a click, really seriously, for the first time in 20 years.
And what's going to happen there? Do you think we as search marketers are going to have to become like voiceover experts? We're all going to have to figure out how to really prime our we're basically, what if that's what happens to search marketers? We just become glorified basically voice specialists who writing creative is about optimizing to the best written and then sounding ad that. I mean, it almost in a way moves us a bit back to television. It's weird. It's an audio format rather than, maybe we'll move away from, like you said, that visual text or banner format more so. Yeah. That will be strange.
Can you imagine? This instant answer is sponsored by Kool-Aid. No, just kidding.
Yeah, well then it'll be about, how do we make the content almost feel like it's not an ad, it's almost just part of that
voice search experience. Like, it's almost like native content, and you want it to feel blended in, but you also want it to feel like your brand. And yeah, that will pose a weird kind of melding of almost in a way traditional audio and TV based branding and messaging with a search focused intent type of marketing. And how would those two collide? And it would be strange for sure. I don't know if there's many marketers right now who would know how to do that if that like happened tomorrow, that would be bizarre.
Well, hopefully it won't happen tomorrow, but okay, so can I really twist your brains and say, okay, so what if we converge machine learning / AI with the chatbot technology that we already have? And when I ask, voice search, hey, Google, I need a plumber. And instead of getting something visually presented on my mobile device, the Google Home asks, okay, or responds back, okay, I know of 3 highly rated plumbers in your area. Well, what exactly do you need to have done? Well, my toilet just broke. Okay, such and such plumbing gets a 4.5 star rating and is available right now. Would you like for me to have them contact you? My gut is that may be where paid search placement eventually takes us, is where we have to create paid experiences that step us through a process and enable a user to accomplish something rather than clicking to something.
Yeah. And then it will become as well about, okay, how does an assistant, using AI, gather that information? What are the signals it pulls from? So is it more that will we give advertisers the flexibility to live in a new system where they get to basically enter in that content, where it's like, let's say it's, you enter in your rating and you have to prove it. And like, what would be your byline and what would be your brand name? You want to make sure is said by the AI as they, kind of essentially scrape or combine that data source that they're pulling from. So there's, let's say if Google continues to move in that direction and shifts how we set up campaigns, will they allow for advertisers to get to control that? Or will it be, like Google doesn't really care if advertisers like get to do all that kind of special stuff. Instead, they need to make sure their website is enabled and set up in a way that, are they relying on ratings or reviews or, other things that again tie back into what you're doing from an SEO perspective. So it could like flip that way too. And it's a little unknown as to what that would look like. My first inclination is to think that AdWords would allow for some more of that kind of manual input or customization, just because the more you give advertisers that power, the more money they'll likely, or you believe they'll spend with you. It's kind of how AdWords came to be. But I mean, it's not 100% certain what that would look like. We might get some of that power taken away.
I'll tell you one thing, they're going to have to give us more characters on the ads if that's the case.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a pretty limited, that classified text ad feel, it's very limiting, and it would be interesting to see not only how, voice search plays into that, but even if we were to say, okay, let's say we maintain still some sort of kind of search experience on the search engine results pages with, paid ads and organic, will those formats also start to change to feel and look more like, a social or, provide these other content formats? I always think of, we have clients who run ads on other search engines, for example, Naver in Korea, in which case the ad format on Naver as a search engine and how ads look completely different, like very visual, definitely, larger text format. And there's just things there that more correlate to what that culture expects and looks for when they're searching.
Sure.
And so I wonder if, when we look at like the kind of typical Western Google search experience, if that will start to change too. So people almost feel like the experience between a banner they see on a website, an ad they see on social, and an ad they see on search, like kind of starts to feel the same. Like if we make it all blended together, we get this feeling of that native content. The more an ad doesn't look like an ad, how will that make our SERP look different too?
Yeah. It almost would have to carry through to a device. So like if you did a voice search, that a specific topic that would carry through to your device. If it's something you're interested in, great, send it to my phone or something like that. So it's seamless.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Other follow-ups, and that's another great thought of how when people get that information, or they request that information via voice search, once they need something tangible, visual, a coupon code, directions, a phone number, whatever it is, where does that push to, and what does that look like, and how do advertisers get to, or will they get to control the format of how that's delivered? Is that the moment that is that considered your click-through rate moment, or is it really just in that initial voice search?
Yeah.
It's a somewhat undefined plane right now. There's definitely, I think, signals as to where it could go, and just the rise of voice search, and obviously the demand or interest in it. But it'll be interesting to see how big players like Google, or even folks outside of search like Facebook, will have influence over it, and who will kind of lead the charge, who will follow, who will adjust. It'll be interesting.
I think it's making me crazy, because I heard someone said at SMX that from Google that their goal was to be able to, with the voice search, or say Google Home, is to say, give me the best price on a big screen 60-inch TV, and then they give the best price, and then you say, okay, purchase it.
Mm-hmm.
Totally skipping the whole conversion funnel. It's just from straight to inquiry to checkout. It's just, wow.
And how, Google might build in some, basically model some of that behavior for consumers. Buy the new Google Home and you can make purchases, and this is how you would do it. And if they model things like, I want the best price, or I want the one that's has the highest rating by consumers, there are these things that they're telling consumers, this is how you make purchases.
Mm-hmm.
They're telling consumers what to value, whether that's price or free shipping or whatever. And in a way, it's weird to think about, but then do they get to impact the economy in that sense, where they're basically, if you have the best price, then you're the winner, and anybody else who can't compete on price, is hurt because you're modeling for people how their consumer behavior should look like via voice search? It's a dangerous, power that Google has to be aware of as they're kind of teaching people a new experience of how to search. And then, like you said, how to skip maybe the rest of the conversion path and just get right to the actual checkout.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's maybe they'll do some kind of a rotation, where the same ad doesn't show up for the same query twice.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, certainly we're already able to segment out our search campaigns by either desktop or mobile.
Sure.
One of the most obvious things is desktop, mobile, voice. For
so
the
maybe
Google
that's
Home
what it'll be. You'll
device.
just also run voice campaigns. It's almost like different inventory, different strategy. Yeah, and
it would have to be.
and how
it's a completely different user experience. I don't see how you could reasonably expect. Granted, there is some crossover between straight up voice for Google Home or Alexa, and hopefully she won't mind. Mine is sitting really close to me, and I'm like, shh, don't talk. I may say your name, but don't talk. But we've got to be able to segment that out and realize that that's a completely different type of creative and formatting and everything else, even though there might be some degree of crossover between mobile and straight up voice on a audio only voice device.
Yeah. Maddie, we got about 5 minutes left before we have to end our session, but I wanted you to touch on Bing, because a lot of people are not really giving Bing its well-deserved. And I wanted, because a lot of people are thinking, okay, all the search is on Google. I don't need to spend any money over on Bing because I'm not going to get a lot. But that's totally not the case. I mean, at least that's my belief,
No, you're totally correct. I do agree. Google gets to often be the the number one in terms of market share, at least in quite a few markets. Sure. So therefore, they kind of get looked at first. They're, you know, they get to be the top of the list. But I mean, Bing, recently they just released some numbers in markets like UK and France and Germany and I think Australia and Brazil. They've made a lot of headway in their market share numbers over this last year. Yeah. And then in the US, they continue to maintain, I think it's in the 20 to 30% range of search market share. So they do have a good chunk of the pie. They shouldn't be ignored, as well as they are an important, I think, tactical choice that you can make depending on who your target audience is. So one of the things I actually just recently got a great deck from Bing where they kind of walked me through updated metrics around this as I talked through it with prospects. But it was around basically who is the audience on Bing. Bing skews usually much more affluent, higher educated, typically skews older. Obviously, as well, just the fact that how Bing is integrated into PC devices with Windows 10 and that rollout over the last, was that year and a half now, 2 years? Yeah. You know, it gives them a very unique audience to go after. And, you know, for example, if you are someone who is looking for older, higher income as part of your audience, then, you know, Bing should not be left out of your strategy. It's an important place for you also to dedicate a chunk of your investment.
Yeah. Sorry,
it's great.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and most of the time you will pay less per click and CPM than you will on AdWords. And I was talking to Perna she's one of the national trainers for Bing.
Yeah.
She was telling me all the great things that they're rolling out, like image ads in search, just some amazing stuff. But
yeah, they have a lot of the same functionality as Google, and in the areas where they have gaps, they're actively always looking to how they can improve and build upon it. And again, yeah, as an engine, comparable in terms of features, has a more unique audience, and like you called out, generally because competition is lower there, typically driving lower CPCs and CPM. So any advertiser who's hesitant about it, I would definitely suggest looking at dedicating, you know, at least 15 to 20% of your budget as a test there to drive and give it an opportunity, because we've had clients who Bing performance is fantastic for them.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we are about out of time. I want to thank you so much, Maddie, for being on the show. It's been awesome. Lots of great information you shared. Can't talk.
No worries.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was a great, very future-looking conversation, which is always a lot of fun. Stuff absolutely. I love talking about. So thanks for having me.
All right, you're welcome. And we'll be sending out the show shortly after, so people can share it or listen to it if they missed it or whatever. All right, guys, I want to thank everyone for being on the show. Michelle, did you want to add anything before I keep going here?
I think I'm good. I feel like I've dominated the conversation a little bit, but hey, you know, I'm here for you, Robert, whatever you need.
Well, I got to take a break. Well, guys, thank you for listening to the show. Be sure to go to searchtalklive.com, sign up for the newsletter. Go to Spreaker and follow us there. Hit the pound the like button. If you like the show, I hope we were able to give you some nuggets here and there to help you out with your paid search and move forward with some actionable items. But also go catch us on Twitter. I'll be sharing the show afterwards. You can catch us there. If you like Search Talk Live so much, we're on 24/7 if you're in the United States on iHeartRadio. Just do a search for Palmer Radio Network, and we are on there 24/7. Thanks, guys, for your support. How much time do we got? 1 minute. All right. I'll let you sign off the show, Michelle.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Tune in next week. Who do we have next week? That would be a good thing to tell them, Robert.
I knew you were going to say that. Next week, we have Dixon Jones, Marketing Director at Majestic. What?
It was worth waiting till the last minute to find that out.
Anybody ever heard of Majestic? Everybody, right?
Oh, yes.
My daily use of tools. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Find the true value of your home when you log on. HomeValue.com.
Search Talk Live is sponsored by the Robert Palmer family of companies. Check out RobertPalmerCompanies.com for more information.